Good morning. It is Sunday, September 18th, 2005. I'm Jim Williams.
And I'm Alita Guillen. We begin this morning with a special guest.
We do. U.S. Senator Barack Obama joins us this morning with his insight on the relief efforts following the hurricane, and John Roberts, but we'll start with the hurricane. Welcome.
Great to see you guys.
And Senator Obama, right now, FEMA is saying not so fast. The mayor in New Orleans is saying move in.
Well, I think the mayor, Mayor Nagin, understandably wants to see businesses and life come back to New Orleans as quickly as possible. But the fact is we're still in the middle of hurricane season, and my understanding, we just heard Admiral Allen, who's in charge of the relief efforts down there, stating that the levees still are insecure, that if you in fact had a severe weather event, that potentially you could see flooding all over again. You don't have 911 systems set up, electricity set up. So it sounds to me that we're better to be cautious, make sure that we've got it right. We don't want any kind of repeats of what we've seen in the last couple of weeks.
You were critical of the federal government's initial response to the hurricane relief. President Bush has been very aggressive. Primetime speech Thursday night, price tag of possibly $200 billion to rebuild the Gulf. What do you think of the administration's performance in the last several days?
Well, I thought that the president's speech set the right tone. I was glad he took responsibility and recognized that, in fact, in most of these situations, the federal government is the only institution that has the capacity to deal with such a severe cataclysmic event. And so I was glad to see that. I was glad to see that, I think, for the first time in his presidency, he acknowledged not only the problem of poverty, but also the connection between racial discrimination and poverty. I thought that was useful. What I'm worried about right now is making sure that the $62 billion that we've sent down already is well spent, that we end some of the practices of no-bid contracts, that we make sure that, in fact, the money is going where it needs to the people who need to be rescued, that we start training people down in that area so that they can participate and benefit from the rebuilding process. And those are the kinds of things that I think we're going to have to monitor in the weeks to come.
If the reconstruction project ends up costing $200 billion, how are you going to pay for it with a ballooning federal deficit?
Something's got to give. And you know, I think everything should be on the table, but the president has to acknowledge that we can't have $200 billion, $300 billion for Iraq. We can't then also spend another $200 billion for reconstruction and then provide a repeal of the estate tax so that the wealthiest 1% of Americans get a tax break. The numbers just don't add up. And I think that everybody, including Congress, has to take a look and say, what are we going to do without in order for us to make sure that this rebuilding process takes place?
Senator, you've been down there, you've seen the faces of these people firsthand, and you know that they've lost confidence in the federal government.
Well, I think they've lost confidence generally. They feel overwhelmed. I think that, you know, you've got some folks who suffer this tragedy but have the resources to bounce back quickly. You have other people who were abandoned even before the hurricane, abandoned to dilapidated schools and substandard housing and poverty and lack of employment opportunities. And so with the second group, I think we're going to have to make sure that we really dig deep and think through how can we effectively help these families get back on their feet. But that's going to require long-term solutions in terms of education, housing, and so forth. And I think Democrats and Republicans have to approach it not from an ideological perspective, but just figure out what's going to work, make sure it's cost-effective, make sure that the programs are run well. And if we do that, then I think we can at least make improvements on some of the trends in increasing poverty that we've seen over the last several years.
Every few years there's an event in this country that makes us think again about race and poverty. I think about 1992, the riots following the Rodney King verdict. We talked about race and poverty then. Is this going to be one of those events, and is anything significant likely to change in the way that we view the poor and the way we view the minority community? Well,
I think, first of all, what we have to recognize is that there's a direct connection between poverty in low-income communities and the tough times that middle-class folks are going through. You know, not only has poverty gone up, but wages have been stagnant. Not only have the poor been going out without health care, but so have a lot of middle-class folks. And so we generally have to think about our domestic policy and think about how we're going to make sure that people have wages that allow them to support a family. How are we going to make certain that everybody's got health insurance? This is part of a larger conversation. Part of the problem is we isolate issues of poverty and pretend that that's just a segment of these people, when in fact everybody has a stake in making sure that all our kids have basic opportunity.
Senator, we don't want to take up any more of your time, but we do want to ask you about another big story this week. The John Roberts hearings have been going on. Your take on that, and how will you vote?
Well, you know, I don't know yet how I'm going to vote. I'm actually going to be meeting with Judge Roberts on Wednesday of this week, and we'll have a chance for a more intimate conversation. You know, the problem with these hearings, you know, the judge is a very smart man. I think everybody understands that he's a very capable person. He is not going to be drawn out if he doesn't want to be drawn out. And you know, the game that's been developed in confirmation hearings is that basically they're coached to say as little as possible, which means that the senators end up doing a lot of talking. We know a lot about the senators' views on the Constitution, but we don't have enough information about him. I'm hopeful that this individual meeting gives him another opportunity for him to share with me, not his qualifications, because he's clearly qualified, but rather what's in his heart. Does he have the breadth of concern for everybody, including people who are not part of the mainstream, that allows him to serve in this position of Chief Justice?
So though you are a Democrat, you are not an automatic no.
I'm not an automatic no. I want to listen to him and go into it with an open mind.
Senator Barack Obama, thank you so much.
Wonderful.
You're on Face the Nation.
Thank you for
spending time with us this morning.
It was my pleasure.
All the best to you and your family. Thank you.
And we'll have a live report from New Orleans in our next half hour, so stay tuned for that.